Okay. Good evening and welcome to the Milford Board of Selectmen meeting regularly scheduled for September 28th, 2015. The first item that we have is the signing of the warrant.
Move, Mr. Chairman.
Seconded?
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous. The second item that we have is the approval of meeting minutes for September 14th, 2015.
Motion.
Seconded.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? Any opposed? That too is unanimous. Invitation to speak. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the board? Mike Visconti?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Mike Visconti. I reside at 7 Muriel Lane in Milford. I came here tonight because I became aware that there may be some discussion between your board and the building department with respect to enforcement of some of our zoning bylaws.
Specifically the sign bylaw. That's on the agenda for tonight, Mike. So I would, if you're gonna make comments on that, I'd ask maybe you hold that off till we have that discussion and allow you to speak during that time, if that's okay.
That is fine with me, sure.
Okay, be a little bit more relevant, maybe.
That's fine.
Okay.
I did not mean to jump ahead of the game.
Well, no, but the only thing is, we've got a large number of police and fire here, and, you know, at any given moment, unfortunately, they could be called out the door and would like to give them recognition before something
I understand.
unfortunate might happen, but.
I understand perfectly.
if-
No
if-
need to explain.
If you're interested in the sign bylaw, that's on the agenda, so we have representatives from the planning board here. We're gonna have a full discussion and obviously give you an opportunity to be heard on that as well.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to address the board? Hearing nothing, we will go on to our scheduled public hearings and appointments. The first item that we have was a scheduled public hearing from Mass Electric and Verizon regarding a proposed pole location. However, the involved customer indicated, the homeowner rather, indicated he's not putting the pole on public property, it's going on his private property. Therefore, there is no need to go forward with that hearing. Second item that we have is a very significant one, I think, and I'd like to ask the police and the fire chief to come front and center. I think all of us have realized that since the events of 9/11, the face of public defense has changed in this country. I think all of us up to that time sort of assumed it was the military that was first and foremost in terms of defending a civil situation, but after 9/11, and of course evidenced by what happened at the Boston Marathon a year or so ago, you know, the face of civil defense is really the firefighter and the police officer. And whether it's a natural disaster or one instigated by terrorists, things like chemical spills, you just name it, the list goes on and on. It's the police and fire that are there first and foremost to ensure everybody's safety, to ensure that the scene is secure, organized, and things proceed. It was brought to my attention by John Seaver that the governor proclaimed Sunday, September 27th, as First Responders Day in Massachusetts. And seeing we don't meet on Sunday, Monday night, the next day, was certainly the natural day to have both departments in to give a public recognition. You know, this board has had really the pleasure and the privilege of attending the police recognition in May, the firefighters ceremony in June. We've done it for a number of years. It's a very touching ceremony. It's a very meaningful ceremony. I think it's appreciated by all. This, however, is a little bit of an outgrowth of that. It's a recognition statewide for all first responders. It's an opportunity for us to say thank you to our police and fire here at our public meeting, which is televised, for the entire community. So let me reach out first to Tom O'Laughlin, our police chief, and then secondarily Bill Toohey, our fire chief, and I ask you to say a few words on behalf of your department.
I think it's fantastic, and we really appreciate it. It's humbling. We go out every day and do our jobs, and you know the relationship that I have with, Bill Toohey, and he has with me, and what I had with his brother John, and each and every firefighter, each and every police officer. This community is extraordinary in the relationship that we have every day that we go out to help people and make a difference in their lives. And it's not just police fire, it's EMS too. We have, professional EMS service that works with us, and we're fortunate. Those relationships transition right through, they permeate right through every department. And we know each and every day, we talk about it, that, wow, we made a difference there today. And that's the key. The key is leave a situation better than you found it. We see things across the country, and, my deputy chief, who's videotaping, taking pictures because we have our own Facebook page. But Jimmy comes in days and he sees things online. He says, "Can you believe that? What are we doing in police training across this country?" And it's telling when you look at who we hire, why we hired them, because it's just a different approach. The approach, law enforcement's easy. That's the easy part of our job. Making a difference in people's lives, that's the tough part. We talk about the opioid, issue, heroin. Just last week, he and we put 3 people into treatment on phone calls. And that's where you make a difference in people's lives, is listening and making a difference and working with our counterparts. I can't say enough about the fire department, who have responded to my house several times for fire alarms. Thankfully, no fire, but no, they're awesome. They truly come, they're respectful, they care, they make a difference, they figure things out, and they help you out. They treat you as you would want to be treated, and I can't say enough good things. So I'm honored to be here, and I'm actually humbled because, the fact that the governor did this, particularly with law enforcement in the light of what's happening in this country, we're fortunate. We're fortunate. I hope every day that people in this community believe that we're trying to make a difference in how they live, and a positive difference. And, my friend, you're up.
I certainly do.
Echoing what Tom said, it is very humbling. It's nice to be recognized. A lot of the time, we just look at it as we're just doing our thing. We're doing our job. A lot of people view that, as above and beyond, where we view it as just ordinary. But it is nice to be recognized. We work great. We have a great group of guys. We work great with the police. They've got our backs. We have their backs. And the ambulance too. Community ambulance has some really outstanding people here. And we have a really good team that works very, very well together. And, you look forward to coming to work every day.
Well, you do a great job, and let me turn it over to my colleagues so that they can share in this recognition as well. Bill?
No, I appreciate you calling this, and John reaching out to us to make sure that first responders are recognized. Appreciate the governor bringing attention to the special people that we have across the Commonwealth. I can talk and attest to it from a personal perspective, and there were several occasions where either fire or police have responded, and where my grandson wasn't breathing and was when they left. They helped transport him to UMass Medical, where he needed specialized care. He's got some unique challenges, and I want to tell you that's very personal. We had a little minor issue this weekend. Police were on top of it. Had somebody breaking into vehicles and stealing things. It happens in our neighborhoods, and we've got a very professional group here that I just want to make sure you guys understand that you have our full support. The people that not only are sitting at this table, but there's a great deal of Milford people, as evidenced by the standout in the winter and the cold days. We see what's happening across the country. You earn it every day. I know you're not dealing with people at the best of times, and it takes very special people in my opinion, to be able to help those people and help our citizens. So thank you very much, and from a personal perspective, thank you from my family as well. Thank you.
Brian, if I could, just, I mean, very much like Bill said, you know, we've all been there. I walked out of the station, everything started spinning out of control when I had the vertigo, and who was there? The fire department, the paramedics. And I knew I was in good hands. I knew I was okay. I was in the best hands I could be in personally. So things are personal in that respect. The issue with Bill this weekend, Bill comes home and sees that a spotlight is on, and I keep telling people, if it doesn't look right, call us. We'll come, we'll check it out. If it's okay, then we leave. It wasn't okay. He said his spotlight stays on 5 minutes. He saw the light on in his wife's car. The end result is, the guy took minor things out of his car, but he stole an engagement ring and a pendant that a young man was gonna give to his fiancee, who hid it in his car, hoping
That
that,
was in your car, Bill?
the other fiancee.
Let's not bring up my girlfriend.
Hoping that it would be safe, and the end result is, simply because Bill called,
Yeah.
mind you, after midnight, Joe Rizzoli driving through the neighborhood and then getting out on foot and walking, and he encountered the guy breaking into another car. And that's where we recovered that property. I mean, that's the sentimental stuff. The guy said he couldn't afford to buy the ring again, but the sentimental value to him meant so much. So
That's a good story.
those are people that walk away. 5 people, we returned their property from one phone call. So I would encourage people, call us. It's 911, it's easy. Same with fire department. You don't feel good, you're not sure what's going on. We come down, we tell you you're okay, we leave. And things are good. So it works for both of us. Something doesn't smell right, you think there might be smoke, call. Don't wait till there's fire. These guys, they do a great job. They come down, they check things out, trust me, been there, and then they go. So you go buy a new smoke detector, which they keep yelling at me. These are outdated, but we're working on it. So you're right, Bill. Thank you.
Well,
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just echoing my colleagues, again, thank you very much. I know I couldn't do either job, and I'm grateful that there's heroes out there that do. I guess, other than, again, echoing my colleagues, that you have the support of the board, you also have the support of, I think, the vast majority of the town of Milford, both our firefighters and our policemen and women. So, again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
it's very gratifying to me. I don't do as much criminal work as I used to, but I am in the courts, and I do get a chance to see a Milford case as opposed to a case being brought by another department, and not to disparage any other departments, but it is gratifying to see the degree of professionalism that the Milford case carries through the court system, to see the degree of respect that's accorded to the Milford police officer by the district attorney's office, by the victims, and not so good for a defense lawyer, but the probability for success of the Milford case is much greater than the other departments that we see. I don't have as much involvement with the fire department. There was just that one time I burned down my garage, but other than that, you haven't had to come to
More
my...
involvement than I want.
Oh, that's a bad story, but I do get to see the Milford Police Department more often than the fire department, but I also see the fire department involved in motor vehicle accidents primarily, do a tremendous job, on the scene, the rescue wagon, stabilizing everything, and we're very, very fortunate to have these two departments so professional, so courteous, so caring in our communities. And I should mention, we have a large contingent of police here, and we had a large contingent of fire, too. Unfortunately, a number of them were called out right before we started. Some of them started to come back in. So let me ask all of the gentlemen and ladies to please stand, so that you can be seen on camera. And we have a Town of Milford proclamation, September 28th, 2015. Whereas first responders are a diverse group of professional and volunteers from across the Commonwealth with backgrounds in fire, police, medical services, towing, transportation, environmental, state law enforcement, among others. And whereas these selfless individuals are prepared to assist the Commonwealth's residents at a moment's notice, often putting their own lives in danger to help others. And whereas during the Boston Marathon bombings, first responders were instrumental in helping to save those who had been injured and shepherding other bystanders to safety. And whereas on this day, we recognize Massachusetts first responders and the service of the men and women who are first to help those in need. Now therefore, the Selectmen of the Town of Milford do hereby proclaim September 28th, 2015, First Responders Day. Milford Board of Selectmen, William E. Kincaid Jr., William D. Buckley, Brian W. Murray, Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen
And ladies.
and ladies.
She's still here. Is she here? Yeah, she's okay, let's move on. The next item that we have is an appointment with the building commissioner and town planner. Also, town council is here. I also see representatives, I thought someone from, Lena McCarthy, Chair of the Planning Board, is here, as well as Joe Calagione, members. So John, why don't you come down, Larry, Jerry, Joe and Lena, certainly come on up front. And what we have here, let me just try to put this in context a little bit as everyone's getting situated. We had an attempt at the last annual town meeting to bring a bit of order to the sign bylaw through a town meeting vote. Unfortunately, that did not pass, and we're left with the existing bylaw that we have. The planning board has been working very hard on coming up with a comprehensive sign bylaw, which we think will address a lot of the concerns. However, that's not ready for prime time yet. So in the meantime, we received a request from John Erickson, the building commissioner, in terms of a bit of direction for enforcement of the current sign bylaw. Now, overlapping all of this is a Supreme Court case that came down in June of this year, Reed versus Town of Gilbert, Arizona et al., which addressed municipal sign bylaws very closely, very detailed, and has set some real parameters as to what communities can do and what cannot be done. So with that, let me turn it over to John, because it was your memo that we received that kind of brought us here right now.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I said in my memo, I'm just looking for a clear directive from the board on how to enforce our current zoning bylaw. There was some enforcement actions taken back near the beginning of the year, which were discussed at a previous meeting here by the board, and I received some mixed directives. I didn't receive any formal directive from that. It was suggested that I use professional discretion in the enforcement. It was suggested that certain signs are not to be removed. So I'm just looking for a clear directive on what to do, what the board would like me to do with the enforcement actions on our current bylaws, zoning bylaw, sign bylaw, when there's a clear violation of the bylaw.
Okay. Larry, maybe you could just give us a little summary of where the planning board is with the proposed sign bylaw?
Yeah, I think you may, Mr. Chairman, you may have already had a copy.
We have a draft.
Yeah, the latest draft was a total rewrite. They've already been able to spend a couple of meetings getting into it initially. My concern in walking them through a review of it was to understand the structure and the context with the new Supreme Court ruling for content neutrality. So we just kind of have begun to get into it. I think there'll be probably a dozen more meetings between now and the annual town meeting where the planning board, before they actually have a public hearing, would be able to discuss it and flesh it out. But obviously, the only thing in the context of content neutrality that we'd be able to address are the several items that the Supreme Court decision enumerated, and I think Jerry repeated them in his memo, his cover memo to the planning board. So if you're looking at the number and the type and the size and whether they move or not, or whether a sign's lighted or not, you're in a position to regulate that to the extent that it makes sense to do so. But you can't regulate a sign based on what it says. So if you have one sign type that might have a variety of applications, we're stuck with whatever we decide by zoning district, what that sign type can be or not. If the town decides to prohibit that sign type altogether, it could do that, or just prohibit it in residential zones versus non-residential zones. But to get into what it says or what it's relating to, then we get into big trouble. So we've just gotten into the bylaw review with the planning board really at this last meeting. So it's on the agenda and will be on probably every agenda of the next dozen or so meetings we would have between now and when we'd actually have to have a public hearing for, I'm assuming, a May annual town meeting.
Okay. Jerry, maybe if you can just, add to the legal context a little bit. I mean, I think you know the problem. There are some signs that virtually everybody likes. We all like the Girl Scout signs. We all like, the Boy Scout signs. There are other signs that people don't really like so much, about foreclosures and buying cars. And for some reason, this CNA thing proliferated Main Street this past weekend. I think that's with CNA.com or something. They're-
Certified nursing assistant training.
Yeah, it's proliferated Main Street, so telephone poles everywhere. So there are signs that people generally don't like. What's the problem with enforcing the ones, taking down the ones we don't like and leaving up the ones we like?
What we're talking about, and I think the concerns that I've heard discussed, have all been what our bylaw calls portable signs, called temporary signs. That's the issue. It's not the permanent signs. It's the portable and temporary signs that pop up in people's lawns, that pop up everywhere around town. Businesses put them out. They're put out by good organizations, by commercial organizations, by not-so-good organizations all across the town. And in the past, there's been a desire to address them from the standpoint of, what are organizations that are beneficial to Milford? Can we allow those, not allow those? We want to make a distinction between nonprofits or commercial. A lot of discussion of that over the years, but that discussion sort of ends with this Arizona case now. Because all those things I just talked about are questions that you have to look at the sign. So you have to look at the content, so they're no longer content neutral. Even a question of allowing something for nonprofits but not for others, that's not content neutral, because you've got to look at the sign to determine whether it's or not. So it really does put our current bylaw, in a very difficult position, because all the provisions in our bylaw relating to portable and temporary signs are directed at the content. We specifically, my memory here, we prohibit temporary signs except for the following, just like that Arizona bylaw. We allow all political signs. You gotta look at the content to see that.
And the Arizona bylaw had more categories
Yes.
than
Oh,
ours,
it was much more
but the
detailed.
principle is the same.
The concept's exactly the same. We have another provision that allows real estate signs. Again, that's content-based. We got another provision that allows some temporary signs on a temporary basis for some things, but again, you've got to look at the sign, you've got to look at the content, so that's content-based. So if somebody said to me right now, does our bylaw in relation to signs meet constitutional standards? It does not, as to the temporary and permanent signs. The rest is okay. The other provisions in the bylaw are generally acceptable, but the provisions related to this issue of temporary and permanent signs, I can say it, don't meet constitutional standards by this very, very definitive last word by the Supreme Court, frankly. I might have not anticipated that decision on their part. I might have thought that by prior decisions, we have some ability to do some of these things, and I think some of my predecessors drafting these bylaws thought that based upon other decisions. But that's all done now. The court, very strong decision. It wasn't just, one faction. Although there were dissenting opinions, most of the court agreed with the result in the case. So that's going to be.
They did, even though they did say they concurred the majority went too far.
Oh, absolutely. But they concurred.
The ultimate outcome is tough to argue with.
So to try to enforce, I'd be very, very hesitant about taking anybody to court right now based on, saying they're violating our bylaw based on putting up temporary signs. So very difficult to do that. In fact, it really wouldn't be justified and very risky to do that. What the bylaw, looking forward, the bylaw that Larry had drafted and that I reviewed and that John reviewed, it's pretty good. I think it really does address it because it takes away all the content-based issues. You no longer look at the sign. And generally, we'll say in a residential district now, people could have 2 signs of a certain size. Nothing about content. So if I want to have a Murray for Selectmen sign and a Joe's Cleaning Service sign, I can have those 2, but I can't have a Will Kincaid sign. I got to make a decision, but we don't look at the content to make that judgment, just the numbers of the sign. So that sort of handles it in a residential district. It does open it up to more signs than we might have wanted 30 years ago when the other bylaw was passed, but at least there's some regulation there and it's not content-based. I think what is being proposed to the planning board now is content neutral and would pass muster. Be nice to get that going, but if we can't do it now till the annual town meeting, that's a long period where we really can't be involved in a lot of enforcement, at least in my view. So that's the difficulty.
Okay. Let me turn over to the board now. I think that kind of sets the parameters a little bit, and then we can hear from the planning board and others after that. Bill?
Yeah, I'd probably like to hear from John, because John wrote the memo, and talk to, if you could, John, the signs that are currently in conflict. What are the ones that we might typically see that have not been mentioned? So some examples.
Well, the examples of the illegal signs as the bylaw is written now is certainly Tank Field or Dilla Street, or Town Park with banners on the fences with sandwich board style signs advertising events at the high school or anywhere in the community. The signs on the islands for food drives, Boy Scouts, stump grinding signs, the CNA signs that was just mentioned.
Where did those come from? They came up overnight.
So those are the types of violations that we have now.
Would the Lions Club signs be illegal?
Yes.
Would the hospital banners be illegal?
Hospital banners where? At the hospital? On site at the hospital?
Yeah.
They may be, it depends. Right now, if they're in conjunction with the application for permanent signage, they are allowed.
Would the signs at Rosenfeld be illegal?
They would be right now.
So I want to rewind time a little bit, take a little stroll down memory lane. It was the selective enforcement that I personally had issue with. So the question then becomes, you're looking for guidance from this board. Frankly, I don't know the sign bylaw. I haven't committed it to memory. It's not my job to do that. Between me and enforcement of sign bylaws is a few $100,000 worth of salaries. Rick's direction, Jerry's guidance, planning board's assistance. We attempted a sign bylaw, as the chairman said. What would you propose?
In terms of what?
Enforcement. You're throwing up a jump ball to the selectmen who don't enforce signs. We've got issues with selective enforcement, but what would you propose?
Well, I take exception that it's selective enforcement. We do our best with enforcement across the board, between every zoning bylaw. That doesn't mean we can get to everyone. We can't. With our current staff, we can't get to every illegal sign, every unregistered vehicle, or any of a number of other violations. We do our best, especially when we get complaints, we act on them. As far as what do I propose for a bylaw?
No. What would you propose the enforcement process be? You're asking us.
I'm asking you, I'm not proposing anything. I'd like a clear directive because I got mixed messages from that meeting.
So how many times have you gone down and ripped down signs from Rosenfeld Park?
None.
How many times have you asked that the hospital signs be removed?
None.
How many times have you asked that so you went down and ripped down some signs?
No, I didn't rip down some signs. I had been
You had some
dealing,
signs removed.
I I had been dealing with an ongoing problem, which is documented, for much of the past year, and this goes back to '07. Heavy complaints from a number of residents complaining to the water company back long before I was the department head. We finally got them cleaned up in November, so I went forward with doing what I thought was the best course of action by reaching out to the organization, telling them that they're not legal, taking the sign as it's on town-controlled property, and offering that they can pick it up or I'll deliver it. And I thought that was in the best interest of solving an ongoing problem, preventing it from recurring right away, or if ever, and moving forward, trying to do my enforcement.
Yeah, I don't know. There have been long-standing signs. We're talking about the girls softball league at the thing, but that's just by way of example. I understand the challenges for enforcement. I view the problem as one of selective enforcement. That's my heartburn. You can take exception. There are lots of cases where I think it's easy to look the other way, or as a smaller group, or by virtue of a complaint on a particular sign, now you've got to go enforce. I don't want to be reactive to complaints. I want to be proactive in this process. Just out of curiosity, did you support this sign bylaw in October that was proposed at town meeting?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And I didn't hear you speak, but that's all right. I think there were questions about enforcement that were some of the bigger challenges. You know, I would tell you to do your job. And if I need to say that to Rick, so that Rick can say it to you, I would look for guidance from council. And very simply put, as soon as you get into selective enforcement, there's the problem. There's going to be the problem because that group is going to feel singled out. That group is going to say, hey, there's a sign just like that down at another field. There's a sign just like that at the hospital. By my reading of the sign bylaw, what is it that you have against us? And why is it? Is it, if it's reaction to complaints, that's not the answer I want to hear. So,
If I can interject, that's something in all of my time here. Signs, there's so many signs around town. I just been driving from the end of my street, maybe 500 yards up West Street. I saw 6 or 7, quote, illegal signs. You extrapolate that across town, you're talking, could I say thousands of signs? Perhaps I could, if you really look at everything that's up there, from yard sale signs to I'll buy your house signs that are all over the place. It's thousands of signs. So since I've been here, all building departments have taken a very practical point of view, which is that they address complaints. They don't go out looking for signs per se. In most cases, they address complaints as they come in. For better or for worse, that has been the approach in the past. It's sort of all changed now with the Arizona decision now, because to call a sign, a temporary sign, illegal now is no longer a good statement, because our bylaw is unconstitutional. So to go out and enforce it now, I think, is very problematic. If anybody wants to stand up to that, and they'll prevail, because our bylaw, any judge looking at it is going to find that our bylaw is content-based, and therefore, as to temporary signs, is unconstitutional. There's really only 2 choices here, which is, maybe that's only 2 choices there ever have been, which is full enforcement, not selective enforcement, but full enforcement, maybe increase staff to do that if we had a bylaw that met constitutional standards. But we don't. So my suggestion would be that we simply don't enforce it until we get a bylaw in place that's enforceable.
and that's in light of the
In
recent
light of
Supreme
the
Court.
Arizona decision. Yeah, if we'd been having this discussion 3 months ago, I wouldn't be saying that. Because
Right.
I'd be trying to address it based on
Or still.
prior decisions. But the Arizona decision has put us in a position as a town, it says every city in town, and many have these kinds of bylaws. Ours is not unusual. Ours is probably more usual in terms of the way it does try to strike a balance in the temporary signs and doing things that we once thought were positive in terms of the First Amendment, which was like allowing political signs. Everybody thought that was what we should do, or allowing signs for churches, as many do. Things that met First Amendment standards suddenly actually violate First Amendment standards. So the 2 choices that John faces right now is, do I plow forward and continue to enforce our bylaw? And if he does that, it has to be done fully, without reference to whose sign it is, whether it's CNA or the Girl Scouts or anything else. If we're going to enforce it, they've all got to go. However, now again, everything has changed with the Arizona decision. Frankly, it's not the result that people who don't like these signs will like, but the better result is, let's get the bylaw in place and enforce that. And in the interim, we can't do much of anything.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Will?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Speaking of heartburn, I think this is, I guess it's a little ironic, but this is an issue that I think causes a lot of people heartburn. I know I'm the newest member to the board, but this is an issue that I heard about greatly over the last few months, even leading up to the election. You answered a lot of my questions initially between the conversation and Jerry, your last comments. Being content neutral, which I never thought it was about the content anyway, so like, I guess that doesn't really, I guess, change anything other than, like, up at Tank Field, was it the location, or was it the sign, or because it's in a residential area and people were looking at it, so they called and they complained, versus all of these other ones that you named, the stump grinding, ones I wouldn't think of, but as we drive around, we're seeing them. And quite honestly, they look horrible. I mean, the town does, I mean, there probably are thousands of signs, and this is something that really bothers a lot of us. But I don't know, being here at a public meeting, a televised meeting, the advice is also, I mean, you know the law, I mean, you're the one who gives us our advice, but I just don't know if saying that we shouldn't enforce it for the next year or 10 months, because just reading the draft and everything, I give a lot of credit to the planning board too, because the unbelievable amount of detail and everything that goes in here, and then I just asked John a few minutes ago, can we enforce, can we enforce this? Because at this point, I'd rather go with full enforcement, and maybe I'm gonna anger a lot of people tonight by saying that, but I'd rather go with full enforcement than no enforcement, because I don't know if that's an invitation so that we're even gonna have 2,000 more temporary signs at Town Park, everywhere, where people are looking out of their house and seeing this. And then, I don't know if that's gonna keep the problem at bay, or if it's gonna make it worse for the next 10 months or so. So, I guess if we get the message out, if that, this is going to have to be full enforcement, if in fact you can fully enforce this, that we at least try our best through social media and the print media and the radio to say, you know what, folks, especially organizations, if you put up a sign, I'm sorry, they're gonna be removed.
Well, we can remove them on town property, those that are put on town property, which
Yeah.
we haven't typically done, but we can't really go on private property and remove them.
Okay.
John's never had the power to do that.
No,
What
no,
you
no.
have to do on, the
Yep.
ones that are on the private property, on even a valid bylaw, you've got to, if people don't comply, then you have to issue a citation or bring an action up in district court.
I was gonna say, it's a fine.
There'd be a fine.
That's how a lot of towns do it.
That's how every town does it. It's where you have to do it, yeah.
Okay.
You can't really go on private property.
No, of course not.
Everything else.
Yeah.
But you can take the ones on town property, theoretically, the ones on Tank Field where we control it, where we control the property, we can physically take those. Separately, the ones that are on poles are different violation. They actually violate a different bylaw, we're part of our general bylaw. And those, the police department can enforce and take down anytime they want, those ones that people stick on poles.
Okay.
So but it's a different bylaw, and that's not a question of content, they're just not allowed on poles, so those can go down, but to go on a private property.
Again, is that
you
an
can't do
enforcement issue? Because again, we're talking about the
That's
CNA
not about-
ones. There might be 10 up there. Have 10 come
They show up
down?
on utility poles, they can't be there, and that's actually something the police department can help with, because that's actually enforced not by the building department, but by the police department, because it's a general
Okay.
bylaw, and they can have a policy of just taking those down. Be they a yard sale sign for my neighbor, who I like, but they can't do it, and everybody does it, so they'd have to be taking them all down. But that's just one aspect of it, where we don't face that content neutrality. The rest of it, we face it, and although we can continue to try to enforce it, the words I have to use, and try to get people to cooperate with enforcement, if it comes down to taking them to court, that's a different issue.
But I think for the time being, and I use this as an example when I was a little disappointed with the way Prospect Heights Park was being maintained, and some of our other parks, just because after large crowds. So, to me, we have to, at least being the caretakers for the town, I think we have to at least set an example that if things are on town property, are we at least being consistent across those town properties, not because someone just happened to complain because they live across the street from Tank Field or sit at that intersection like I do every day coming home from Boston, versus other places. So again, where we can do full enforcement, I'm I guess that's my recommendation, but John, I will echo something that Bill said. I was gonna ask you, my second question was, what are you recommending? Because that really is important. When I write something or put something up to my boss, and I say, hey, these are the 3 issues, and believe me, he doesn't always take my recommendations, and a lot of times you wonder why you go through the exercise if there's gonna be brushed aside, but you have to come to the table with something. So seriously, do you know, I mean, how would you wanna go forward? Whether we agree with you or not, how would you wanna go forward? Because that's important to me.
I think there's no doubt that what I would expect you to do is tell me to do my job, which is to enforce the zoning bylaw. Unless there's some underlying reason that Jerry's mentioning that something is no longer enforceable that we thought once was. That's why
I will tell you, I wish it was in here. I do wish that you said what my recommendation is, that you just wanna do
I want a
that.
clear directive from my appointing authority on which direction you want me to go. I want a clear answer to be able to tell the residents that reach out to me, some here tonight, some just randomly, when they call me with a question or a complaint. You know, I get questions now, can I put a such and such type of sign in my yard at this location? I say no. And their first answer, their first response to that is, I can name a number of other signs that are out there like this. But I can't tell them, yes, you can go put it there, so. And I think without a clear directive, it's not fair to any of the residents.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I might.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So you need a directive from us not to selectively enforce certain fields, certain fences, certain signs?
No, whether or not to enforce the zoning bylaw as it's written is what I'm looking for, a directive on whether to do that or whether not to. Because at the meeting in January, it was stated very clearly, you don't want those signs removed.
Because you had a long-standing practice to leave other signs alone at other public fields. And we just talked about some of those examples that you've not cited. So if it's about Tank Field and not Rosenfeld Field, or about this field and not that field, that's a different discussion, John.
No, well, just, I think it's very simple. I'd like a clear directive. Enforce the zoning bylaw with respect to signs, or specifically temporary and portable signs, or don't enforce the zoning bylaw, especially moving forward. There's a problem that certainly came to light in January.
Oh, it certainly did, because you targeted certain groups as certain field.
No, I didn't
And
target.
you left others completely alone.
I didn't
You
target
had
certain.
long-standing left signs there that you had just said were illegal.
No, I was working on an ongoing problem at a certain location due to numerous complaints.
So Mr. Chairman, you know, my recommendation is if,
I don't know if Will's done.
oh, are you done?
Do you
No.
have anything else, Will? I didn't want to.
Go ahead. I don't
No,
wanna
no,
cut you
you're in the
short.
middle. No, go ahead, finish. I'm
Okay.
good. No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And specifically, my directive would be to stop selectively enforcing, and if you're gonna enforce at all fields, enforce at all fields. Look for like signs, don't target specific groups or go to one field. If you need help with that, and beyond what's available from town administrator or Jerry as counsel, let us know. I would echo what Will had said, you know, instead of asking for direction, make some recommendations, because I'd like to see recommendations. I'd like to get us out of the selective enforcement business, and I think that is the root of the problem. And I think that's exactly what stirs and pits groups against other groups, and neighbors against other neighbors. So that's my 2 cents. I would say, if you're gonna enforce, in light of the recent Supreme Court decision, be fair, be balanced, make sure that certain groups aren't targeted and others are not, make sure that you are not hands-free and leaving others alone that represent the same problems, and then we're probably not gonna have an issue. Because the discussion is not simply just about enforcing, it's about selective enforcement. That's my opinion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Will, are you all set for the time being?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, let me, because I know the chair of the planning board is here, and I didn't know Lena or Joe from the planning board, if there's anything that you wanted to add on it before I make some comments.
No, the only thing that, in terms of what we're doing and issues that we have, just so you're aware, and really what the board at all of our meetings has said is that with the change that you see in front of us and whatever that final version looks like, we expect to, in some form, come back to this board to come back to John prior to that ever going to town meeting, because unless there's an agreement from all of the town as to how that moves forward, we don't believe it's gonna move forward. The town, being here all my life, is somewhat unique, and it'll present problems to us. I know many years ago, we had the discussions about political signs, and that stirs a lot of emotion with people. Well, we now have to take that out of the realm. So I don't think this town would ever go forward not allowing political signs, which means we're gonna allow signs in residential areas effectively in terms of this bylaw. There's no way of stopping that. But, and we've had various discussions in terms of the, what temporary means going forward. In the bylaw now that you see, I think that, outside of the content area, which has been made clear to us that we can't really look at, there is size requirements that I think still can be part of the bylaw and can be part of the bylaw now that are important in the temporary signs. But it also, we've talked about this in terms of how we want to go forward and what we think is correct. We don't want to burden the building department. I don't think we want to take out and have somebody do a permit for temporary signs. So we may take out temporary signs, and signs may be allowed over the whole length of time. I don't know that we want to do that or not, but if we have a time frame, I can tell you right now, the time frame is probably going to be one that says you can have a temporary sign for X number of days. The only way that's going to be able to be monitored by the building department is somebody's going to call the building department and say, hey, my neighbor's had a sign up for 2 months. Can you have them take it down? And John's going to go out and say, yep, on today it was there. And then whatever that time frame is, he'll go back and say, it's still there, take it down. Because there's no way we could monitor that. There's no way we could monitor having somebody come in with a list of political signs saying, okay, I'm going to put political signs here, there, or there. So it puts us in a difficult situation as to how we move forward with the bylaw. And we want to make sure that the board is aware of that, because, again, we don't want to overload the building department with that, the enforcement department. I don't think that's a good use of town funds. So we will be coming forward. It will take us a while to get through this bylaw, but we'll try to come forward before annual town meeting, try to get this board on the same path as where we are, take your input, and then try to make sure that we go forward with a bylaw that has the support of all the town fathers, because I think that's the only way, knowing zoning bylaws and stuff, and you all know how difficult it is to get them to pass. That'll be the only way that we can get that to pass at the town meeting, and it will be a difficult bylaw because there'll be a lot in it.
I think the draft looks good. I mean, I haven't had a chance to really, go through it nuts and bolts, but as I glance through it, I think you're definitely on the right track.
Yeah, Larry's done a very good job of it. We've had various
Yeah.
discussions with it. I mean, I think call it the nomenclature, the definitions will need to be worked out so that everybody's on board as to what we mean or don't mean. I know there was a big thing about balloons and stuff. I think we have to look at that. I don't believe that was Larry's intent, that you can't have a happy birthday sign, a balloon out in front of your house. But you need to understand that there are signs that people put out that are inflatable that maybe we don't want. What the wording of that is or isn't, as we go through the bylaw, will be something that gets shaked out over the next few months.
Well, I think, and I heard that little blurb on the radio, but, I think what the board members need to realize as they're reviewing this type of a bylaw, you want the definitional section to be as broad as possible. So that, and I don't know that this could ever happen, couldn't even imagine it, say somebody put a sign out on a snowplow, and it had profanity on it, and it targeted a certain individual. Well, you would want the sign bylaw, even though it's a snowplow, you would want the sign bylaw to be able to encompass that. Not that it could ever happen.
Yes.
Well, I just want you to know that we've been through this week after week and trying to tweak it, trying to ask Larry how much more do we have to do. But we were kind of looking towards the selectmen who feel that it should feel the same way as we do. So we really need your input on how you feel about it when it's all done.
Okay.
And I think that's a very important part of it. As far as John is concerned, I think John has done a good job. It's not easy to have 500 phone calls and saying, I've got this sign in my backyard. It's been here since December, and the event was in September. So I think that was a lot of other issues, And to give John his due, he's out there. I've been there complaining myself. But he does do a good job. Laurie does an excellent job. And we've got another 3 or 4 months to tweak this, and he is hoping that when we come forward to have you see it and look it over, that you will agree with what we have decided on.
Well,
Your input is a very important part of this.
and that's what I was gonna say, we're not gonna waste this opportunity, we're not gonna waste this time. So one of the things that's gonna come out of this meeting is I'm gonna ask both of my board members to review your draft bylaw, any commentary, funnel it off to the town administrator, and then that's gonna go to the town planner. So you'll get feedback from our board on your draft. That will allow your board to go forward and adjust it, tweak it, whatever you wanna do. I think it's absolutely essential that this bylaw or a derivation of this draft goes forward at the next annual town meeting.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
The other thing, the technology, whatever is going on in town, everybody knows about it. There's, between the radio and between the telephone calls and signs, I don't know, I always thought signs would probably be the end of it all, but it seems like there's more signs now than ever,
Signs for CNA.com, I mean,
That is,
Don't forget your stump grinding.
yeah,
all the way up Depot Street
yeah.
is amazing. It
Yeah.
really is. So
Okay.
I thank you very
Yeah,
much for having us
thanks for being
tonight.
here, thanks for the work that you're doing on it. It's not an easy job, and I'm glad you decided to take it on and kind of straighten it out a little bit. I know Mike had wanted to make some comments, and I promised that I would allow you to do so. So Mike, why don't you come on down, because this is what you wanted to address us on.
Once again, thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Mike Visconti. I live at 7 Muriel Lane. My original intent of coming here tonight was to ask your board not to encourage the building commissioner to enforce the zoning bylaws discretionarily. Rather, encourage the building commissioner to enforce our signed zoning bylaws, along with the rest of our zoning bylaws, to the letter of the law, across the board, and without discretion. With discretion, it can only end up with the building commissioner being pulled in several different directions. As you know, he serves at the pleasure of your board, and each of the board members may have different, different feelings on what sign should stay and what sign should not stay, and you could end up with the building commissioner and his office being pulled in 3 different ways with respect to should this sign stay or should this sign not stay. I say enforce the bylaw to the letter of the law and move along.
Yes.
I am personally, and maybe Mr. Erickson can attest to this, I am personally probably responsible for the tank field sign issue.
Did you put those signs up?
Not putting the signs up,
Oh, okay.
but
Citation.
Okay.
at least notifying the building commissioner
Oh,
on behalf of my neighbors who have to look out their windows or walk by and see the fence littered with garbage signs, makeshift signs, some of them laying on the ground, blowing in the wind, on a number of occasions ending up in my neighbors' yards.
and of course,
That, to me, is unacceptable.
I know, Mike, and you're right. And what makes the problem even worse is the sign might be up for an event on August 1st, and it's September 1st, and the sign is still there, and it's in disrepair. I know.
Our sign bylaws, up till this point, have kept Milford at a level of sophistication that you don't see in surrounding towns. If we do not enforce the sign bylaws to the letter of the law, Milford will end up being just another town along 495. And I don't think that's what you want. I know it's not what I want, and I'm sure Mr. Erickson doesn't want that. So please, I'm here asking you not to cripple the building commissioner's efforts to have these illegal signs removed. Rather, encourage him to enforce the sign issue bylaw, along with the rest of our bylaws for that matter, to the letter of the law. What will happen, and I can envision this happening, as you know, we do not allow unregistered cars in this town to be on people's property. Well, if we allow discretionary enforcement with the sign issue, the building commissioner could go out to inspect an unregistered vehicle on a property, and when he gets there, say, wait a minute, I had a car like that when I was younger. You know what? I think that car is okay. You can have that car there. It may seem absurd, but it's not that far out there. That's what we don't want to happen. We have the bylaws. Let's enforce the bylaws. As far as, and I haven't seen the draft of the proposed new bylaw, but in my opinion, I believe all we have to do is tweak our current bylaws to bring them in conformance with the court ruling. I don't see the need to rewrite. We tried this once before, to rewrite the entire sign zoning bylaw, and town meeting shot it down. This happened on 2 occasions. I don't see the need to go through that again, spend a lot of time and effort for no reason. Tweak the bylaw we have. Remove the exceptions. For example, I think the political signs, and there may be a couple other exceptions I'm not certain of. But there are sign violations that people aren't aware of. You've seen them, I've seen them. Real estate open house signs at the corner of a street with a little arrow pointing down the street, those are illegal in this town and should never be put up and should be removed immediately, if not sooner. A lot of people don't know that. I am somewhat familiar with our sign zoning bylaws. Actually, I'm somewhat familiar with all of our zoning bylaws. And there are other instances of sign violations and zoning violations, for that matter, that do not get addressed, not because of selective enforcement, but just because the building commissioner and his office might not be aware of them. I believe the building commissioner is, to the best of my knowledge, is not being selective. If signs get by him that are illegal, I believe it's maybe because of insufficient time or maybe not insufficient notification. And that's why they're probably there. We spent a huge amount of money down at Louisa Lake beautifying that area. It looks like a dump. It looks like a ghetto down there with signs littering the fence, blowing all over the place. Unacceptable.
Yeah, I think that's a bit extreme, but go ahead.
Matter of opinion.
It is. You're entitled to think a portion of our town looks like a ghetto. I would strongly disagree. People work very hard to make that nice.
Keep in mind, we have at least 2 locations in town where organizations, community organizations, can post their event neatly on a very well-made sign. There are at least 2 locations where that can be done to get their message out. We now have out-of-town organizations placing makeshift signs up at the tank field fence and other places, simply because they're not allowed to put them up in their town, but they say, well, let's go put them up in Milford. They don't care. Unacceptable. Please encourage the building commissioner to enforce the zoning bylaws to the letter of the law. Thank you. That's
Okay,
really all I had to
thank you,
say.
Mike.
Thank you.
And I would encourage you, and I'm sure you will, before you leave, grab a copy of the draft bylaw and take a look at it, because I know you had many, many years on the zoning board. And if you haven't had a chance to read the Reed case, do it. It's no pun intended, it's an easy read. And it sets the parameters, and it'll just give you additional understanding where it was trying to come to. But thanks, as always, Mike, for your
Yes,
point of view.
I did purpose preview that case.
Okay.
I did not study it in depth, but
Okay.
I plan on doing it.
All right,
And
and
I
then
would-
get a copy, Larry can get you a copy of the draft.
I will stop by Larry's office and ask him for a copy.
Okay, all right.
Thank you again for your time.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to address on this particular issue? Mrs. Bontempo? And this isn't really a public hearing per se, but, it didn't really make sense to have folks come for invitation to speak when they might want to say something relevant but out of context, so I think it made a little bit more sense to do it all here at once when we're all talking about the same subject.
Good evening.
Evie?
Yes. May I ask town council or the chairman of the planning board?
Yeah.
A question. I have the draft that was given to me.
Okay.
That was drafted on September 1st, 2015. Is there anything in that with a time limit for signs? Why I ask that is there is a sign, no? Okay.
Not
There-
yet.
All right. There
Well,
was-
she's asking, is it in the draft?
Is
Oh,
in
is
the
it in the
draft.
draft?
Yeah, she's asking, is it in the draft?
draft you're
Is
asking
it-
about.
Is it, Counselor?
I'm gonna have to turn to Larry. The draft I saw had time limitations in it proposed, unless that's changed.
Yeah, this one doesn't
I didn't-
That's why I said not yet.
That's one of the comments that I made in terms of temporary signs and whether we actually have temporary signs or not, is their ability to be
Time-bound.
monitored. So that's something that we want to discuss going forward. In the current draft, I believe it does not have that. That is up for discussion as we move
All
forward,
right.
certainly.
Thank you. As an example, a sign was placed September 23rd, 2015, for an event to be held Thanksgiving morning, November 26th. That's over 2 months that sign will be there. There seems to be a turf war to where signs can be placed. So that was just one of my questions, whether or not that you can put into it a time frame. I'd like to clarify something. I am on record through my emails to the building department directed to the building commissioner, Mr. Erickson, and directed to Miss Lorianne Braza as the assistant enforcement officer. It's all documented. I have called many times, sent emails and called, and I rely more on my emails because therefore there is documentation. I fully support that the building inspector have the authority to be the enforcement officer. My last point is that I'd like to clarify, and I will direct it to you, Mr. Buckley. I was the one twice that called Mr. John Erickson about the softball sign. There was only one sign up, and that sign was on the chain link fence from the spillway at Kiwanis Park. And I requested that it had been up for over 2 months and that it would be removed. And yet, at the Selectmen's meeting, he was told to put it back. It was my request. It had been there for over 2 months. And it was illegal by the bylaws that are now enforced.
May I respond?
Certainly, please.
I think the examples given tonight talk about a great deal of fields, a great number of signs that are illegal.
No, I'm just pointing, Mr.
No,
Buckley.
but we
to
can't
the
be
soft-
selective, Mrs. Bontempo.
Excuse me, you were selective because you told him to put it back. You were selective, sir.
I'll let you continue and let me know when you'd like me to respond.
Well, I am charging you, I'm saying you were the one, I witnessed it there. I witnessed it. You told him to put it back.
Let me clarify something. There are a great number of fields that have illegal signs in this community, none of which have been enforced.
This is
There-
not a field, this is a park, sir.
Mrs. Bontempo, please, let me say town property, just for the specifics. They have been there, the signs have been there, they've been long-standing, and there's been no attempt by this building department to enforce. It's been selective enforcement, it's been to different groups or to the loudest person that yells. What I'm asking I think you heard it clearly, I'll try to restate it, that if Mr. Erickson is going to do his job and not selectively enforce, that he not go after specific groups or specific parks, but address all illegal signs at all town property and all town parks, so that I don't get a call, and this is part of my frustration, and I apologize in advance for that frustration coming out, that one group that plays this sport is not being enforced against, while this team or this group at this field is being enforced against. So it's very simple. Either you enforce them or you don't enforce them, but don't target enforce them, and don't wait for the loudest person or the person to send the most emails to you, because that's not code enforcement. If we're going to send a message, we're not going to send a message to the Girl Scouts. We're not going to send a message just to the girls' softball group, and we're not going to send a message just at Tank Field. If Mr. Erickson is going to enforce, if that be the message, then he certainly needs to enforce. That's my position. That's the complaint I've received from people. I understand the challenge with the signs, but it cannot be selective enforcement. So my point is, if we're going to leave the signs down at another field that are also illegal, that we've talked about here, then go put the other sign back, because otherwise it's simply selective enforcement. It's not fair. I'm all for fairness. I'm all for equity. I don't want selective enforcement.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Excuse me, I'm sorry, may I respond? Sure. Excuse me, Mr. Erickson.
Okay, sure, yeah, Abby, yeah.
Excuse me, Chairman Murray. It was one sign on one fence at a park that I requested, after a long duration, was illegal, would he please remove it? And my point is that he was told, after he removed it, to put it back. One sign, one organization.
I understand that, yes.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
John, did you want to say something?
Yes, I did, Mr. Chair. If you look at our history, and I can certainly give you a report over the number of illegal signs that we've targeted since my appointment in 2011, it's certainly not what I would consider selective enforcement. We have hundreds. I don't know when the next one in queue becomes selective, when it's an ongoing battle to enforce the sign bylaw. And again, I'd be glad to give you a report on what we have done since 2012, when our software came in. But again, I keep hearing that sentiment, and I couldn't disagree more with it.
Yeah.
It's not selective enforcement, in my mind.
I understand.
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, if you don't mind.
It's fine.
Look, we have a bylaw. I think out of everything that was named, I think you just go and they all have to come down. Wherever they are, if they're illegal, they have to come down. I said that 20 minutes ago. I'm saying that again. I'm only one member. But I think they all need to come down because there is a bylaw in place. Until a new bylaw is put in place, I'm certainly not going to be part of any motion to give direction other than, we already have we have a bylaw in place. So take them all down, enforce the bylaw, because, and again, at the next town meeting, you, the planning board, everybody, and this is why I give the planning board a lot of credit, and I'm not saying this because they're sitting here. I'm saying because you read this over and over again. You know how many town meeting members said to me after my first meeting as a selectman, I don't know what I was voting on. We voted against something because we didn't know what we were voting on. They put years and months into this, and town meeting members have to vote on something that a lot of them are reading, honestly, for the first time when they get their packets in the mail. Which is why we have another group here tonight that I'm going to praise up and down, because they want to address some of these types of issues. Town meeting is a wonderful thing, but they have full-time jobs. They're doing everything that we do, except they're doing it most of the time twice a year. They didn't know what they were voting for. So that's a major problem. I was very uneducated. I'm sitting there the first time with my colleagues going, okay, a couple people got up and spoke, other people didn't. Where's this going? I find this stuff to be the most difficult thing we're going to talk about. Yeah, later on we might have differences of how much money to give back taxpayers. That's philosophical. This is actual, on paper, sorry, sir, this is illegal. So I just think that we're getting banged up because there's history here on the term selective. However, we listed a whole bunch of things, certainly things on the list that I didn't know were illegal, but take them all down. Because we're the ones that have to say, yep, you're right, I know you're angry, your sign came down, but guess what? This time we'll be able to say, they all came down. And I'm lucky, I live in a subdivision, so no one wants to put something across the street from me. But I certainly wouldn't want to look at things that are outdated and things of that nature. And that's what we hear, that's what we hear from so much. I remember the first sign thing that I remember was back in '07, where the gentleman has the kindling sign. And that was a big stir. I know that predated you, John, but that was a big stir. And that was on private property. So that's I guess a whole different,
That was a political issue. I mean, in the
Right.
sense that people just jumped, his sign was quote illegal, unquote. People directed him to it. The then building commissioner took action, but then people made a big deal about it because it was an old man and he was a veteran.
No, there's no
Which
question.
are not issues we should be getting into in terms of.
but again, it wasn't the only illegal sign in the town of Milford. So again, whether you use selective or another term, pick something else. If it was his sign, but not the signs that Mrs. Bontempo has to look at outside her window, or that Mike Visconti has to look at, that's why we gotta take them all down.
But what, if I could.
Our phones are gonna ring too, but we have to do it. We made a commitment to clean up Milford, and guess what? The signs are an issue. That's why they're trying, the planning board's working as hard as they can, so that they can come up with something that, number one, covers everything, or is general enough to cover everything, so we don't have another plow. I'm glad you brought that up as an example, because that was an embarrassment to the town of Milford, to have that out there. Having little kids ask their mother what those words were. That's what I got from my age group. Will, get those out of there. I can't. We have people talking, the police chief and everything else, talking about people's constitutional rights. But if they're illegal, take them down. Our phones are gonna ring too. And, we're just gonna have to say, then vote at the next town meeting, call your town meeting members.
Let me
Make
can I-
exceptions, I
can
guess.
Just jump in, Mr. Chairman, if I
Yeah.
can, just to help summarize, I think what the direction
Yeah,
that
and then-
John should be getting, from what I'm hearing, is that you folks want full enforcement of the bylaw in relation to temporary signs, subject to constitutional standards, but you want to try to enforce the bylaw currently. And I think what I hear too is that you'd want him on signs on town property, the building department, with whoever assistance is involved, to take those signs down, no matter whose they are. So I presume they'll do
Well,
that.
let me stop you there,
Sure.
okay? Let me see if I can try to make some sense of this organized chaos. It was unfortunate what happened at the May town meeting. Town council came forward and town planner with, a very brief, small addition to the sign bylaw, which would have allowed signs in places like Rosenfeld Park until the planning board went forward with a more comprehensive proposal. Unfortunately, there were people who got up and spoke against it, including the esteemed Mr. DeLuzio, that felt that it didn't go far enough, which of course it did not. We had tried to explain that it was just going to be a Band-Aid to avoid the situation such as we're having this evening. Be that as it may, here we are. So I think the general consensus is we would all like to see Joe Contractor sign up in left field at Rosie Park. That's, I think that's what we all want. We all want to see, the Girl Scouts advertise their cookie drive at Town Park. There's no question that that's the kind of stuff we want. So, we do have a comprehensive bylaw that's in the draft stage that I think looks very promising and I think is going to solve a lot of these things long-term. Now the question becomes, what do we do from now until May? Fortunately, the winter months will be coming. Hopefully that will discourage a lot of signs in the first place. It's not baseball season, so we don't have to worry about Rosie. I've had this discussion with town council before, and legal minds can differ. I say we use the ambiguity of our present sign law for our benefit. Specifically, section 3.9.12 says that no signs shall be placed within a public way or on public property except with a permit from the Board of Selectmen. So obviously, we're all sworn to uphold the law. That's part of our oath, whether it's the town law, Commonwealth, United States of America. I don't think any of us in good conscience could tell a public official to not do their job and allow signs to stand there. This is a bylaw that the town meeting members, the town of Milford has voted for. Residents have endorsed it. It's in place. It needs to be enforced. However, laws are ambiguous. There are shades of gray. This is not math. It's not 2 + 2 = 4.
What I think might work, another attorney might not. So what I'm proposing going forward is the direction put forth to the building inspector is to enforce the zoning bylaw regarding signs as written, and groups that want to place signs on public property under 3.9.12 be notified that they can apply for a permit from the Board of Selectmen. So the outfield signs can stay at Rosie and any other public property that we deem available. Now, that puts the Board of Selectmen in the sign business, which sometimes we are. We receive requests from organizations to put banners up, sandwich boards. I don't see this as a long-term situation. However, unfortunately, the Band-Aid that we did want to go forward at last town meeting got defeated, so we are in the position of, trying to make chicken soup, and I'll leave it at that. So that's how I see the situation. Jerry doesn't have to say anything. He disagrees with my opinion. But knowing the legal process, if there is an aggrieved party, they would have to go up the appellate chain, and that's fine. That's what the process is there for. If there ever was a judicial determination, I think all of us would probably be retired and living in Florida by the time it comes around, and the situation will resolve itself. So it's obviously a very divisive thing. I think at its core, all of us feel similar. We all want the community signs. We want to have outfield signs at Rosie and in Glazy Field, but there are a lot of signs that are obtrusive and quite insulting, and certainly not in accord with what we want in the community. So I'm not looking for any motions on this, but if there's a disagreement with what I've said, please indicate now, because we could have some involvement. There could be the Little League coming forward, asking for permission to put signs up in the Little League fence. And if we're uncomfortable with that, we need to hear it now. But quite frankly, I can't think of any other solutions until this bylaw gets corrected. Let me just hear from the board first, Joe. Bill?
No, and I want to make it clear that there are a great deal of groups that may come forward based on the history that I would not see an issue with. My concern right out of the gate would be how much available time does the Selectmen's office and the administrative support have to process the sign requests, get them bundled, get them to us, let us review them, make sure it has process so that they're taken down when they should be and not overly burdensome to the neighborhood. But you realize those signs are absolutely going to drive some neighbors crazy.
Well, again, just this is only public property.
I understand.
Okay, so it's not, we can't do anything with private property.
I understand.
But, the public property that's limited, whether it's town park,
I understand.
Rosenfeld, that's the area.
I understand.
Oh, okay, all right.
So
Yeah,
what I'd like to hear,
We'll see.
yeah, well, I don't want to run an experiment that just gets the Selectmen administrative support just running goofy. So I'd like to, talk with Rick and see what he sees might be the impact and how much available bandwidth there exists with the people. The other thing is I'd like the benefit of having to talk to Jerry, get an opportunity to talk with Jerry, outside of these confines, to see what his concerns might be, and then come back and do it. We've got a meeting next Monday. I don't see why not.
Well,
That's fine.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with that. We do have a meeting next week, so.
yeah, so we're not looking for any motions tonight. This is sort of the understanding that I think needs to go forward. We'll have it on the agenda for our next meeting. I don't think we need to have everyone come unless, of course, you'd like to. And I think the concerns or questions that Bill or Will may have can be addressed, and we can take it from there.
Yeah, I think with that, it's implied that those that aren't permitted are coming down,
Absolutely, and
which
I
has
think-
not been the case up to now.
Well, I think, and again, not to rehash what's been said tonight, but there, has been some indecision in terms of which way to go. And I think you did go forward on some cases unsuccessfully because of things that have happened. So, we're at where we're at. and, looking to go forward, looking to try to make the best of an interim situation. I can't think of anything else. So, I'm sure our office can handle it. We handle the applications for MPAC and WMRC and, all of the different ones that want to hang banners and so forth. So why don't we proceed that way? I think the direction is clear. We're looking for enforcement of the town bylaw. I would say pending our next meeting, you might want to indicate to some of the groups that advertise on public property, if they want to do it in the future, they've got to send an application to this board. But you'll get something definitive after the next meeting. Is that fair to say?
Sure. I think we can do that.
All right. I don't
That's
know.
a start.
I don't know if that helps or not.
That's a start.
Tries to get some direction. We've got a lot of moving parts.
Yes.
It's difficult, you've got, different boards, citizens, individuals, but looking at the whole picture, let's use the ambiguity to our advantage. Okay, I want to thank you all for your time on this,
Thank you.
and we'll move forward.
Okay, good night.
Good night.
Good night. Okay, so let's bring up Jose Costa and Reno DeLuzio, who have a very interesting proposal for us. And you can talk as long as you'd like, as long as you promise not to mention signs.
Or plows that look like signs.
Just a bus tour of signs right up to town meeting.
So what we have is, we have correspondence that was sent in May to the town administrator. I spoke to the town administrator about it, and thought that after Labor Day would be an appropriate time to get you folks in so that you can come forward on this. I think that the attention of the community is much greater after Labor Day. We could have had you here in July, and it's like when the tree falls in the forest, So you're here, and not to steal your thunder, but let me just turn it over to you and ask you to present whatever you'd like.
Okay, so by way of introduction, I'm Steve Treadle, and I co-chair the Citizens from Milford group with John Seaver. So why is CFM wanting to get involved in the town meeting process? The simple answer is it goes straight to our mission statement, and that is, number one, to research and provide objective information to Milford citizens and town officials regarding current issues of concern. That's the first part of our mission. And the second part is to encourage active citizen participation by coordinating projects that address what citizens see as important issues. Now, speaking towards that, one of the events that CFM sponsors is quarterly public forums. And at those forums, we've received a number of excellent project suggestions from citizens in attendance there. And at one of those quarterlies, Reno presented a well-thought-out idea of those kind of projects. And that was to improve some of the procedures at town meeting using updated technology to improve efficiency and hopefully thereby encouraging more participation in town meeting by citizens. So the CFM core group discussed this initiative and unanimously decided to support Reno's proposal. Jose was assigned to head the effort for CFM and to work with Reno to implement this initiative. So please know, we have no desire or intention to pursue this initiative on our own. Rather, we're here to seek your support and involvement in this process. And with that, I will turn it over to Reno to explain his idea, and to Jose to brief you on what we've discovered so far in our preliminary research.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Brian, I don't remember speaking against the sign bylaw. I know I'm losing it, but
All right, maybe
that's okay. So let me say at the outset that I've been a strong advocate of the town meeting form of government because it provides the single forum where a number of issues come together and citizens can voice their views and opinions on those issues, which they cannot do in any other public meeting we have in town, because it brings together collectively a lot of things that have gone on between town meetings. I've also felt that in order to preserve our town meeting, every effort should be made to make the meeting meeting experience as pleasant and informative as possible. We heard an example tonight from Selectman Kincaid that an article was presented at the town meeting. Most people didn't know what they're voting for. So, since the town meeting is a duly elected body of the town government, it's only reasonable that they should have a say in the manner in which their meeting is conducted. Now, I've been a town meeting member for over 40 years, and I can't remember a period where the town meeting members objectively evaluated their meeting. Also, as a general principle, I believe institutions should be periodically examined, evaluated, and improved upon, especially as Mr. Treadle has suggested, in light of technological advances. And I know we have an ongoing program to improve the audiovisual mechanics of the upper hall, but there are many more possibilities for information sharing with today's technologies. So to address this town meeting reform initiative, we've developed a multi-step methodology. First is to establish a town meeting working group consisting of one town meeting member from each precinct, one member from the member at large, 3 members appointed by the selectmen, and 3 members from the Citizens for Milford group. The second step is to develop a survey questionnaire for the town meeting members' input. Step 3 would be to develop recommendations based on that survey result and consultations with town council, the town moderator, the town clerk, and various town boards and departments and committees. Step 4 would be to issue a report with implementation actions and circulate for public comment. Step 5 would be 1 or more presentations to the Board of Selectmen, giving you updates on the progress and any findings we find on the way. And finally, to develop a comprehensive town meeting handbook. Now, we're here tonight to request 3 things from the Board of Selectmen. 1, that you endorse the initiative, which we hope you will. Designate 3 members to serve on the working group, and eventually assist in the implementation of the proposed actions that are recommended. So hopefully, you will see that we've onto a mission that's not going to be easy. It's going to take some time. Jose has done some research on other communities on what they have done in improving their town meeting, so he's going to go over some of the work that he's done.
Sure, yeah, Jose, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think you received some information that we passed out, I think Rick shared.
We got the town meeting handbook from Brookline.
Exactly.
Lexington.
The Amherst piece, and there's a couple other things,
Survey
yeah.
town meeting members, Lexington.
Yeah,
Right,
Lexington was the
exactly.
survey, and then this one here, I was trying, this one. looked like-
Amherst on the bottom, I think it
Which-
says.
which one is this?
That's Amherst.
Amherst,
Yeah.
okay. Yep.
So-
Oh, I see, yeah.
Yeah, those are just examples.
Sure.
But especially for people that are, watching tonight, the idea behind it is some of the examples here on, and I think there was an article here too, that Nancy Wojcik sent to me, a Boston Globe article on May 28th of this year. And it was just the argument of town meeting, and there was a view of major reform, and it was a view of just minor reforms, leave it as is. And I focused on that minor reform, which was the moderator from Westboro, who had comments. But at the end, the thing I picked up on that was, he made his comment, even though he felt that you didn't need reform at town meeting, he said, town meeting continue to strive for improved efficiency. A rapidly growing number of towns use technology such as electronic voting in a streamlined process to maintain a good pace. Bylaws can keep the deliberation from being too long or dominated by specific speakers. It's what Vino was talking about earlier. I've been on town meeting now, about 18 years or so, and I don't think I remember that when we've made any significant changes to anything on the bylaws of town meeting. And so some of the examples you saw here was like Mino said, the handbook, and, you know, in the Amherst example, you know, I joked around about the bus tour, but the communities, not just Amherst, others, have bus tours. So if you have, you're voting on land, property like that, they will actually take you in a bus, anybody's interested, and take you to the actual site, so you know what you're voting on. You know, the sign thing, take you around and look at the signs. So you have a good example of, you know, what we mean by locations and that. There are, in this case, you got meetings, precinct meetings. We have cable that we can use even more, YouTube, that you can actually, it's just, as Reno pointed out, it's educating our community. And not only town meeting members, but the community at large. So even though you're not a town meeting member, you are. Electronic voting, some people don't like it, but there are benefits. Benefits of, one, you can move the meeting along faster. You don't have to have the town clerk and town moderator counting and dividing and all that if you have what the vote was, so you get the process moving faster. The other thing, you have people in our community that are shy, you know, that don't like to be put in the spotlight where people are watching them make a vote or so. And they could be making great town meeting members. They might be willing to actually run for a town meeting member. So it's things like that we need to consider. What Reno said about the process here, we have ideas similar to what we suggested, where we could share with a committee. But the intent here is to let town meeting members and others in the community share what they feel. And then from there, we can see what the best, and it could be a multi-phase effort. It could be that some items get implemented immediately, they're just quick items, and others might take a couple years to go through. But I think we need to start. It's just an important piece to help improve and educate our town meeting members and to ensure they're as informed as they can be when they're taking a vote for our town. So.
Excellent. Let me just add one little example that is dear to my heart. And it's that if we have a representative town meeting. If you're a town meeting representative, you ought to be in touch with the people that you're representing and make every effort to do so. And that's one of the things I'd like to see get in there.
Let me turn it over to the board. Questions? Bill?
Look, I'm enthusiastic about the concept of change. For me, it's not about hugging a tree and staying put where we used to be, but leveraging some of the technology. And Jose, you used a great example, and I appreciate the time that you guys have spent on this, because you know, if somebody's shy, it doesn't preclude them from participation or having the same equal vote as anyone else. And sometimes it can be awfully difficult as a town meeting representative saying, you know, I'm not really buying what those selectmen are selling tonight. I don't like this aspect or that aspect. I'm reluctant to stand up. That's my neighbor or whatever. There should be, a lot of those things can be barriers that can be removed. And you know, it's funny because I had not seen data on electronic voting. When I looked at, for example, the Lexington data, a total of 94% of the people that used electronic data or used electronic voting, the ease of use was 94%. That is, very satisfied or somewhat satisfied. There aren't a lot of 90 scores in here. There were a couple of others. Ease of use, 97%, 94% like the idea, although they had to come along with it, it took them a little bit to get used to it. Those are amazing numbers in a survey like this, because frankly, most of the numbers are 50%, 40%. There was no getting great numbers on this, you know. The only thing I hope you're not proposing, if you look at page 19, is 7-day town meetings.
No.
Yeah, I don't think the electronic voting speeded
That
up
didn't
the
speed
town
that
meeting
up.
there.
I don't know what's going on in Lexington, but
Efficiency is one of our primary.
Yeah, if you guys come back with that proposal, it's gonna be DOA.
So as you said, we've worked hard to make sure that at a minimum, some of the basics start to get addressed, right? That people in the back of the room can hear people talking in the front of the room or presenting. I think that's gotten much better. I think we may have a ways to go, but small incremental improvements get us to where we need to be. Staying put doesn't. There's still work that we need to do, and this board has talked about it. Visual presentation
Yes.
is very poor, right? And you know, it's funny about that is, you know, people work and do a great deal of work in preparation for that information that's going on the board. It's a tough room, the size of the room, the lighting of the room. So there's a whole host of things that we can do to make people in the back of the room who are going to be voting on a topic see what they're voting on. So I'm encouraged. I like the idea, the concept of getting one person from each precinct. You know, I'm torn. I'm torn between getting a little more participation and realizing that you can't design a, you know, camel by committee. So you guys must have gone through some of that, right?
The drill committee started with 21 members, that was tough.
All right.
Yeah, it was tough to get going.
That's unwieldy.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
So
So,
I'm-
you know, it's gotta be fair, but you can't get it too big, or you'll just keep chasing each other around.
Exactly. So I think we can do more to inform. I think we can do better presentation. I'd be interested in what this working group came up with. I also think that, you know, in some regards, and we've talked about this here, there's information being dropped on your chair that night.
Too late,
Too little preparation by the group who put it there.
too late.
You can't read it in time.
No, there's not, you're not able, and nobody's able to process it. You know, so I hope that the group also works on that. Is that part of the plan?
Bill, we're gonna send you a copy of the draft survey, so you can make sure we cover all of
Please.
it.
Please, 'cause you know, you're right, Reno and Jose and Steve, to defend this process. And because there are aspects of it that don't work very well, I don't want to abandon it at all. I just want to improve it.
But if we don't do something, it will disappear.
Yeah, you're right. People will migrate to change for the sake of change sometimes, just in the hope that it might do something.
Make it
And there's the baby with the bathwater
Yes.
discussion, right? So I'm encouraged. I like what you've got. You know, I know we've talked about this in the past. I've talked individually with each of you, and I like it. So concepts are good, proposals good. I'm sorry, I went on a little bit too long, but I like it.
That's fine.
Was that clear?
Yes.
All set?
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, again, thank you, gentlemen, for coming in. No, this is, I think, something that's going to be pretty exciting. Being a town meeting member for many years, I know that my opinion was certainly never surveyed, or I was certainly never asked what could change. And again, when I first started being a town meeting member, my contemporaries at the time thought I was crazy to be that young and be part of a process and waste a Monday or Tuesday night when, you know, the rest of my friends were going out. I've learned a lot, though, at town meeting. And it's a process that we all should be proud of. And again, it's something with a lot of history, especially to our region in the country, and other people don't really know what a town meeting is, a lot of times outside of New England. But whether I've been on the winning side of a town meeting vote or a losing side of town meeting vote, we often say that I don't think of a time too often, or I can't think of a time, and I was thinking of this even as we approached tonight's meeting, when I could honestly say town meeting was wrong. Whether they agreed with me or vice versa, or I wasn't part of a winning vote. In the end, you often see that, you know what, that was a good decision. So even sometimes when we make one case and it goes the other way, I think supporting town meeting is a good thing, simply put. So again, I think the most exciting part of all this is what the town meeting members will come back. And I hope there is a large participation rate from the survey. I think there will be, because most of your town meeting members are the ones that know what's going on, try to stay on top of things, are involved in other groups within town. I'd like it to be 100%. That probably won't be the case. You know, people have a lot of things going on, but I hope you make a real effort to reach them through any means, because I think just that feedback alone is going to be pretty interesting. That, you know, and I hope you get to share that as well, even outside the working group at some point, even if it's many months down the road. But that's the part that I'm most excited about, because I think once the working group gets together and you folks make recommendations, I think seeing what we can support, what we can't, what we can afford, what our options are at that point, I think is actually the easier side of all of this. You guys have the hard work ahead of you, again, forming the group and putting this on your plate when all of you have lives and families and 100 other things you're doing too. So, again, thank you very much for doing this, and I certainly look forward to the results.
So we had, Reno listed 3 things that we're requesting of the board. We'd appreciate if you could address those.
Sure.
I would like to say something first. Can I, please? Okay. Yeah, I thought that it was a great proposal coming forward. I've been a town meeting member since 1985. I joined when I was 25 years old. And I had the benefit that time of somebody who I think was just a great citizen, certainly knew town meeting better than anybody I ever knew, and that was Paul Curran. And the way I learned about town meeting was I talked to Paul. And it was good to see this town meeting handbook from Brookline, because basically what they did was excerpt from Town Meeting Time, publication 2001. Well, Paul gave me the publication back in 1985, whatever year it was, and that's the book that I read to learn town meeting procedure. And many times I've consulted that book, and it really is helpful for folks to understand how town meeting works and doesn't work. So, if nothing else comes out of this other than a summary handbook in terms of procedure, which I hope people would look at, you're going to have a better town meeting. I think we in New England are unique with the town meeting. I don't think it exists in other parts of the country. It's the ultimate self-governing. I think in the town of Milford, it has worked very well. It is essentially a check on the government system. If a board or a committee is going too far out the norm, town meeting brings them back in. It's certainly a check on spending. I think it's been disappointing to me, and I know I've talked to Reno about this a number of times, to see the evolution of town meeting in the years that I've been on there. When I first got on there, it was full. There were people waiting to be town meeting members, and the majority of people, I would say, were there for the community's sake. So you could disagree with somebody, but you could certainly appreciate their point of view. I think over time, unfortunately, like really all parts of government and society, it becomes more self-centered, more self-motivated. And you'll see people, the most disappointing thing to me is to see the hall fill up for Article 15 that affects a certain group of people, or they're all there, they're all yelling, hooting and hollering, and everything's great. Article 15 goes one way or the other, the hall clears out. That is so disappointing, because we've got 40 articles that address all aspects of the town. And you just don't seem to have the level of community involvement for community's sake that was there. I'm hopeful and optimistic that your group can bring that back and spread your wings a little bit and do what you're doing by, looking at the community as a whole, doing these kinds of activities that are going to benefit the community as a whole. I think that this is an ambitious project to take on. You're going to need focus as to how you're going to go on this thing. You've got to keep your eye on the ball so you don't get off track by a lot of the technical wizards and gizzardry stuff that's out there now, and really focus on what's important in terms of informing people and getting them to show up to debate important issues. So I think the handbook is a great idea. I think the survey is a great idea. It's interesting to see some of the responses as I looked at Lexington. Just at a glance, and I think Bill and Will touched on it, the pre-town meeting is something that this town can do a better job of. And the prior town clerk, Joe Arcuda, used to have a meeting at the library, and, the town moderator was there, go through articles. I don't know that happens anymore. But clearly in Lexington, I think that there's a lot of
or I should say a lot more, pre-town meeting activity that takes place, which should lead to a better educated electorate and, of course, better debate. So it's not an easy job. I don't know 15 members, but I'll defer to your wishes. That's almost unwieldy as well. But I think it's a great project to go forward on. I think everyone ought to have a copy of town meeting time. It really explains, how the process works. And in terms of the three things that you're looking for from this board, I think all three of us certainly endorse the initiative enthusiastically. 3 members from the working group. Are there any thoughts on
What do you think
how
those
you'd like
membership?
to?
Well, certainly the moderator.
John?
Well, you don't have to decide that now. You can
Right.
give
No,
us
I'm
the-
just,
No.
yeah.
You know,
What are you thinking? What general population? Is it non-town meeting members?
Well, we'll have 15 members, I mean, 1 from each precinct, that's 8, 1 from the member at large, that's 9 sitting elected town meeting members in the group,
All right.
and then, at
You're looking
your
at 3
discretion, up to
designees-
3. It could be
designees
1 or
first.
2.
Yeah.
And then up to 3 from the citizens group, since they're the major focal point for this initiative.
we'll probably do most of the work.
Well, so I was just trying to get some thought. I mean, very simply, we can just advertise and ask people who are willing to, who would like to participate to submit their name to the town
Get
administrators.
candidates and pick
Yeah,
up
and then
to
we can
3.
pick
I
3.
guess.
Let's do that. That's what I was thinking too.
Okay, yeah.
And the other thing is, there's an aspect that's troubled me, and I meant to bring it up earlier, is, it doesn't seem like we're getting at-large participation. It seems underrepresented. And I'm just wondering if, within your ability to collect data, will you be able to subgroup, collect it within subgroups to know if there's a particular issue or challenge in precinct 1 versus 2 or at-large? So if, it all depends how you construct the survey,
Oh, yeah.
right? That you'll be able to break it out, because,
Yeah, that can be done.
we're talking about participation, right? We're talking about an engaged citizenry. We're talking about advanced citizenry. So, those that show up decide, or they say 90% of winning is, showing up, right? So, we haven't had some of the in life, right?
Well, one of our observations is that, a lack of participation is because procedures seem archaic and out of touch with technology nowadays.
But it shouldn't at large. That's why that group has got me very interested.
Yeah.
It shouldn't seem archaic to the at-large group. They should, in fact, maybe, so intuitively, I would answer to say they would be more informed. But that, something's going on, look at the data.
Yeah, we got to get a handle on,
Right. It's just
we
a
all
place
have
to-
our shopping list with
Yeah,
what we
exactly.
feel the town meeting is deficient at.
Right,
I mean, we're
yeah.
talking, but there are
Yeah.
200 and some odd town
Exactly.
meeting members that have to have a say in this, because it's obviously their meeting.
Yeah.
So we'll assemble all this, if we construct the survey properly, we'll have enough data to get a grasp on those things that we should focus on that will make the meeting more pleasant and more informative. That's the objective.
Sure, yeah, for tonight's purposes, I think we need to keep it broad brush. So, you're looking for our endorsement, you certainly have it. We'll set up a process to have 3 people appointed to your group, or indicate that, to the public that we'll be soliciting volunteers who'd like to serve on that. They can submit their name and information to the Selectmen's office. And then, anything that you need along the way, come before us and let us know.
Yeah, we'll come before you when we feel that we were at key points
Absolutely.
during the process and share the information with you.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
We won't surprise you at the end.
You always surprise me, Reno, at the end. All right,
Well, thank you very much for your
Thank
time.
you.
Very much for your time and attention.
and good luck.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's a worthwhile endeavor.
Not again.
Oh, I don't want to know what Gene says, All right. That concludes the scheduled appointments. Let's go to the town administrator's report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a notification, I'm sure you heard from the Milford Water Company. With the current weather pattern and a steady decrease in the water levels at the Echo Lake Reservoir, the water company has increased the restriction level from a stage 2 to a stage 3 in order to prevent the levels from getting too low, which would hinder their ability to recharge during winter months. What this means is the restriction allows for the use of handheld hose only during the hours of 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. for no more than 1 hour daily. No irrigation systems, lawn sprinklers, and unattended hoses may be used, and this will be in effect until further notice. I would also like to alert the board to an LED replacement bulb project. We have prepared and filed an application for free LED lamps under the Mass Save program, which is a free lamp LED offer for municipalities. We intend to try to install over 1,400 LED lamps in the police station, town hall, memorial hall, animal control, and senior center. I want to recognize the building commissioner and the maintenance supervisor, John Erickson and Carlos Benjamin, for taking prompt action and getting the information needed to submit the application, because it was one that needed to be submitted in time. We will also, Carlos and the maintenance department will install these free LED lamps. Someone already alluded to it, but I just want to remind everyone that we will have a selectmen meeting next Monday, October 5th, at the usual time. And the last piece of information, I want to thank Highway Surveyor Scott Crisafulli. He informed me that the bridge at Pheno Field was painted, and he used the inmate work release program from the Worcester County Sheriff's Office. I have a picture here, and it looks like they did a very nice job. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Good, thank you. Any questions, Bill?
No questions.
Well,
No, I'm all set.
okay, moving along, we have old business. We have our town meeting coming up. Oh, that's the signed folder. I don't want to look at that for a while. And Rick, you got the warrant to us. Do you want to just give us a summary of where you're at with the warrant?
Yeah, basically what you have before you is the warrant. There are 28 articles, I believe, in total. The warrant has closed. The warrant is there for your consideration. And there are a number of articles. I think I prepared for you a list of articles also that would show corresponding to the warrant itself. There are a couple of articles, as you know, that we don't have cost yet for. But we'll be getting those shortly. Basically, tonight, if the board would like to review and if possible, sign and approve the final warrant, unless obviously you had changes to
This the one we
discuss.
just got this evening?
Yes, it is, yeah.
So what we need to do is
Yeah, I haven't
to,
had a chance to read it. Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman.
if not, we could obviously do it.
you want to put it on for the next meeting?
Could put it on for the next meeting, which still would make it timely.
Okay, well, the warrant's closed.
Yeah.
Oh, no, the warrant itself is closed, but as far
Warrant's
as posting
closed.
and
Yeah.
mailing, we still could be fine.
Yeah, so we need to approve the warrant and get the process started. I know the Finance Committee is very anxious to get an approved warrant, but if you want to wait till the next meeting, we can do that.
Well, in fairness, I just had an opportunity, 2 seconds to look at it, so I
Yeah,
don't
no,
think
it was
it's
on
sufficient time.
Okay. So we'll have that on for next meeting. Okay, Bill, do you have any other old business?
No old business, Mr. Chairman.
Will?
No, thank you.
All right, moving along to new business, we have the Milford Lions Club with the permit to obstruct. See attached, this is for 3 collection points at the intersection of Route 16, Route 109, Milford Post Office, and across from the post office and police station at Draper Park for a toll road on October 17th.
Move, Mr. Chairman.
Seconded.
Motion made and seconded, all in favor, any opposed, that's unanimous. The next item that we have is an application for a one-day license from the Milford High School Boosters Club for the Oktoberfest, which is going to be October 10th at Pheno Field from 12 to 8 p.m.
Move, Mr. Chairman.
Seconded.
Motion made and seconded, all in favor, any opposed, unanimous. Rick, this, what I have is I have the email from a Liz Sacco.
Yes.
About the intersection of Mount Pleasant Street and Haywood Street.
Yep.
Concerned about a number of cars there and people and so forth. And then I have a memo from the highway surveyor to you, listing a number of no parking signs that exist around the intersection. Is there anything else with this? or-
Fortunately, it is somewhat confusing, but this is
Yeah.
what Scott and the chief have worked on. The original, I think, request went to the police chief, and then Scott reviewed it. He agreed with the police chief, and the number of points there, I believe there are 8 of them. This is where they would like to locate signs.
Okay, so this,
Though it is not the easiest, I will grant you, to follow, and even Scott admitted that to me.
all right, so this is a request then?
This is a
For
request,
approval of no
yes.
parking signs at these different areas.
Yeah.
I thought he was giving us an itemization of what's out
Exactly.
there.
So did I.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not as clear as probably it should
And-
be.
Okay.
however, But that's what it is. The police chief has, the initial request came to him, he went and reviewed, and then turned it over to Scott for his review, and this is the recommendation from the both of them.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we
Okay.
could just get a recommendation and also have it cited as a recommendation, have it written as a recommendation, and have the chiefs, both police and fire, because there's mention about public safety vehicles, endorse it or not endorse it as they wish. I got everything that Rick said, just, the problem I had is in my preparation for this, I didn't know what to do with this document. And it was,
Yeah, we'll put it on for the next meeting.
Sure.
Yeah, so let's get a request from the highway surveyor and also the police chief's concurrence along with the fire chiefs. We have a request from the police chief to dispose of surplus vehicles. 3 surplus police vehicles, 2008 Ford Crown Victoria, 2009, 2011, also Ford Crown Victorias.
moved, Mr. Chairman.
Seconded.
Motion made and seconded, all in favor, any opposed, that's unanimous. We have a memo from Vonnie regarding the Louisa Lake Dam, and included with it is the executive summary from the consultant that had analyzed the project. Rick, I know you worked on this with Vonnie, would you like to give us
Sure.
just sort of a brief summary on this?
Yes, this is, Vonnie and Scott have worked on this. Our consultant, GZA, came back with a report that indicated that the cost would be in the neighborhood of, just to round it up, 600,000, including a 25% contingency. GZA was also helpful in getting the rating of the dam from Port Affair. Scott had done some work there. When that occurred, Vonnie and Scott indicated that we are out from under the mandatory requirement to do the repairs in the time frame that was originally stated. Both Vonnie and Scott had some reservation with the $600,000 figure. They thought it would be best at this point to do 2 things. One, get a peer review to make sure that we are secure with that figure. And number 2, we do not need now to pursue the rest of the contract at this point with GZA. I know Vonnie and Scott both, I think it was mentioned some time ago by either this board and/or FinCom or both, that we should have some idea of going forward with all our bridges so that we can do maintenance, so we don't run into this situation again where we have a mandatory order of compliance. So they felt it was best at this point to take a step back. We were originally, if you remember, going to have an article on the town meeting warrant. Now we do not need to do that. But we need to still go forward, and both of them want to do that, so that we can do what repairs we need to do to this dam and any other dams or bridges that we have in our community. So they thought this would be the best process going forward. So I think they're looking for a couple of things tonight. One, to agree to a peer review of the figure we have from GZA and the report that we have. You have the executive summary. I do have in my office a very thick report that was submitted, which both Vonnie and Scott tell me is a very detailed report. I know Scott thinks that some of the work he may be able to do, which would lessen that figure, number 1. And number 2, we're not sure now that we need to do all of that work, so we want to confirm that. The second thing, obviously, is we do not want to go forward at this point with the rest of the contract, at this point with GZA, because Scott and Ronnie don't believe there's a need to do so. So that's kind of where we're at with that. There's no article on for town meeting, as there's not a need at this point for that, for funding.
Okay, so you're looking for us for approval to go forward on a peer review, correct?
Correct, yeah, I believe,
Because Vonnie's already indicated, or I guess you've already indicated, that GZA work is terminated. We don't need to go forward.
we don't, I
with
just.
tasks 6 through
No,
12.
I would need
Okay.
your authority just to inform them of that. And then there's this draft peer review contract. I believe the lump sum cost is $3,500.
$3,500. And that's from Weston and Sampson.
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
All right.
So that's where we're at,
Yep,
at this point in time.
okay. Let's turn to questions, comments. Bill?
Yeah, I have a number of questions as it relates to this. What I'm not clear even from the summary is, what is it that drove the need for a request for a peer review?
They're not, neither one is comfortable with that number.
But what does that mean specifically?
It possibly could be too high. But do we need all of those repairs? How much can Scott do? How much can the highway department do through its own process?
Right.
So,
That's a different question, right? That's not a peer review, right?
Well, and if I can just interject, because when you look at the book, Bill, and we only had one book, so you gotta like pass it around, but it does have a spreadsheet for the budget, and I think what Vonnie's indicated, and Scott, a lot of the line items in terms of clearing brush and some of the other work that needs to be done, they feel is unreasonably high, the estimate that's provided in the
they're
report.
just not comfortable with it.
Okay,
I'm
so
sorry.
there's where I want to go.
Yes.
Because
And it's upstairs, we probably.
I've not seen that. Well, I've got an executive summary, I've got a detailed packet, and I don't have that in here. Because I have specific questions. This is a engineer that we chose. This is a engineer that we've had a great deal of experience with.
Correct.
Because I have my own questions, how we went from $100,000 and that went up exponentially to $600,000. I'm not sure a peer review is going to do it, so. And given the change in the dam status, why wouldn't we rescope the work entirely? Why do we want to, if I'm going to follow a train of thought that I don't want to put in Bonnie's mouth, she's not here. But if I don't have complete faith or trust in the package I was given, and now I'm asking, and by the way, it's the first request, as a member of the Board of Selectmen in 10 years, I've been asked for a peer review, just to give it some context. That why I would use the basis for that as the GZA estimate, for which I'm terminating the contract and not moving forward with. I think that the change in the status of the dam changes a great deal more than just a peer review for this $600,000 estimate.
Well, I think in terms of the scope of work that we're looking to get an estimate for, that doesn't change. I think what they're uncomfortable with is the actual pricing of the work.
All right, and that's not represented in front of me.
Okay, that's my understanding of the way this is.
And I'd like to hear this. I'd like to hear a little more about this. Again, it's the first request for a peer review that have been given. The costs are, I agree with anybody who says they went up from GZA's first estimate of around $100,000 to $600,000, with no explanation, by the way, either provided to me from town engineer or anything I've received today. And now we're asking for a $3,500 peer review on a $600,000 project that I don't know if I trust the basis for the $600,000. So there's a lot of questions I can't ask here.
Yeah, well, if you looked at and we can have her in the next meeting, I don't want to talk for it, but when you look at the memo, the initial cost estimate was, which is usually ballparked, was 1.25. They did the phase 1, the estimate was revised to 250. They did the phase 2, and that's where it got to the 600,000.
Yeah, and so I'd like to use terms other than ballpark. We've gone before town meeting seeking $100,000 for this project. Nobody told me when I was representing that, I thought we originally got a $100,000 request on a 5-year plan, right? Didn't we get $100,000 for this project?
I think that was for the doing of the report.
That was for the engineering. That was for that was for this work here, the
Well,
100,000.
the estimate at the time was, she's saying $125,000. I've represented that to people. Nobody ever said, hey, Bill, you're using just ballpark numbers. So,
Well, that's a term I use. Maybe that's not fair. I don't know the level of work that was done to get it to that number. I
That was
characterized
before the report
it
was
that way.
obviously done, but yes.
I characterized it that way.
okay.
Yep.
So, yeah, I'd like,
The $100,000, I'm looking back in September of last year, that was for the engineering. That was not for,
The work.
right, not for any of the
so
construction.
the two big questions I have now are, why are we asking for a peer review? Brian's represented some of the things through casual conversation he's had, but I'd like to hear that or read that.
Well, do you want to have Vonnie in next meeting to go over this, or do you want a memo from her? What would you like?
Well, what I had asked Rick prior to this is I had asked that something be provided that explains how the money went from the estimate of 100,000 to 600,000. I don't have that. Instead, I got a request for a peer review, which I still don't understand why we're asking for a peer review if we don't trust the 600,000 or we're terminating with the outfit that did the report. 'Cause that's the basis. The 3,500 is all on the basis of the bigger report. If we don't trust it, I don't know what 3,500 is gonna get us, and I don't know why we wouldn't rescope it.
Well, no, I think it was based on the scope of work that was advertised, and it's the pricing aspect that they're looking to have reviewed. But, we
Okay.
if you've got those questions, I mean, you've got a meeting next week,
Yeah,
so.
we can do it.
There's no reason to try to assume and, that kind of stuff. And I don't know that there's any rush on this, so.
No, we've got
you
until
know,
2019 before the next compliance
Yeah,
check
we're out
is.
from under that.
So let's have her in next
Okay,
meeting.
let's do that.
And we can address whatever, questions you have. Will, I'm sorry, was there anything you
No,
wanted to add to this?
No, that was fine. I mean, well, what I will add is I was just, the one comment that Bill had made that was my question was the fact that why we were getting, I read it the same way, why are we getting a report reviewed that we no longer trust and I didn't know if we were gonna just change the scope of work now that we know, certain things from the engineering and just go back out to bid. So, I mean, to spend $3,500, we've spent more than that on a million other things. It's just, I didn't understand why we were gonna go through that process when she's pretty, I mean, she's very well, she's always writes well, and it's pretty clear that, GZA, she's, no longer interested for this project at this point, so I didn't see the point of moving on to get that reviewed rather than going out to bid again.
Right, we probably wouldn't use them anyway,
Right.
even if the peer review says that's pretty close. I think we'd do exactly what we've casually talked about, and that is rescope it, go out to bid again, and do some of the work internally, and know we have a longer time frame to commit. So I don't know why we'd chase this one.
Well, again, this is just an evaluation to develop specs to go out to have the work done. And, when you look at the proposal from Weston and Sampson, that's what they would do. They would review the completed Phase 2 report, a review of recommendations and cost estimates. So it's there as to, what they want to have a second look taken at. It's not necessarily the level of work, it's the cost of the work. That's in a
Okay.
nutshell. But let's have her in,
Yeah.
because she
Okay.
can probably explain it better than I.
I think
And,
Scott probably could lend some insight too.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
he's worked with this particular consultant.
Yeah, that's fine.
Much longer than
Yeah.
Bonnie, so I would ask that probably we bring them both before you.
Yeah, that's fine, we can schedule, and I don't know what we have on the agenda for next meeting, but if not, we can do it after that.
Right now, it's not that heavy because it's coming
Okay.
a week after this, but we can check on that.
All right, anything else on the new business, Bill?
None.
Will?
Yes, I have one item,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman. It's been asked of me, and I wasn't sure, I asked around myself, but Rick, I was hoping that you could reach out to Milford TV.
Sure.
Just asking them what it would take to, or if it's even possible for closed captioning of local programming. I don't know how possible that is, or what extent, that would be, whether it's cost prohibitive or whatever. But we had 5 more, we have 5 additional families with members that are hard of hearing and completely deaf moving to Milford. And that was something that was asked of me, and that was something that's certainly outside my wheelhouse, one that I've never had to deal with before. And I'm not even sure if it's possible for local programming, especially local live programming. But if we could just get something in writing in a response to that, that'd be great.
Very good. All right. The only item we have under correspondence is another National Grid double pole report. Presently, there are 55 double poles in Milford. Since the last report, 8 were removed and 4 were installed for reliability reasons. That's all that I have. We don't have an executive session tonight. Is there anything else you'd like to bring up, Bill? or
Yeah,
Lou?
Mr. Chairman, I have communication from Zach Taylor that I wanted to talk to as it related taxpayer relief article represented by the Board of Selectmen. I know there's a lot of back and forth and individual thought processes about how levy limits are combined with free cash to somehow come up with a magical number, but what I think it's incumbent upon us to provide some recommendation and guidance, and so I'm prepared to do that. I think we can come at this a lot of different ways, but I want to start with the $5.7 million free cash number. I think the taxpayers are entitled to certainly a portion of that, as do, I know, both of you. I think they're entitled to much more once we get done paying a couple of bills. I know bills are important. I know paying those bills is our obligation. But what I'd like to see is I'd like to make a request of Zach to come back to us with a sustainable and responsible plan using $2.8 million to put on this article to offset the tax rate.
Okay.
That would be my motion.
Yeah, well, we're gonna have him in at the next meeting so that we can look at this comprehensively. So I don't know that you.
What I'd like to do is
go
give him some
forward.
guidance, and I think he can come into the meeting. I think we can talk about that. I think it'll stimulate the right type of discussion, so I'd like to carry forward with the motion.
Okay.
Because we've got a great deal of information prepared for us.
Well, I'll second the motion with some conversation here. You mentioned, and what we've been talking about is the $5.7 million free cash number.
Right.
I did have a very good conversation with Zach. I want to be very complimentary to him, because I had a lot of questions for him. Again, this being the first time I'm actually dealing with this subject matter specifically, and he did a great job. And quite simply, what I want to see, if you're asking specifically for 2.8 million, it's fine. I've heard numbers, through local media. I guess in a range of 2 to 3 million. I didn't get to comment. I had a catastrophe at work, so I couldn't get back to the couple members of the media. I apologize for that. But what I want to see is and I think based on my conversation with Zach, if it's not something formally prepared, for my questions, it certainly doesn't have to be, but the conversation that I want, and I am glad he's coming in to the next meeting so that even people at home understand what the conversation is, because I think when you're talking levy limit and free cash, again, we kind of get all wrapped up into that, and some people are just wondering how they come across certain things. Quite simply, I just want it explained and talked about in great detail that if the free cash is $5.7 million, minus all the capital we're paying, minus what our goal is or what the conversation is on what we want to put away for stabilization, obviously Woodland's on the horizon, but again, what I don't want to, talking out of both sides of our mouth, so to speak, when over the last few years, we've said, oh, we've prepared for Woodland by doing this, this, and this, but now we still want to put more away, or do we need more, or what's the rationale behind a certain decision being made? So again, the free cash, minus all the bills, minus what we're going to support, and if everything, all 28 articles at town meeting passes, what that entails, and then, quite honestly, what is left and what is the real number we're dealing with. So,
Yeah, I think it's, as you know, that's really, one part of the puzzle. And, Zach and I know Rick, they're working to formulate a plan along with Mark Shane. The Finance Committee wants to get involved. So, I mean, we can make, whatever motion you'd like, and I have no problem with that. But, we just wanted to hold off on a peer review for $3,500 until we hear from the town engineer. So I would think that we would want to have the finance director come in. He'll have a full comprehensive plan for us, then we can see where the numbers are, and then we can express to him at that point what we think the number might be.
Well, and I also had a discussion with Zach, and I think it's helpful. My takeaway from Zach is it would be helpful for the leadership of this board to go forward talking about what their target is. And by the way, if that's not responsible and sustainable, we'll have a different discussion. But I wanted to present a target, let them know I wanted it to come out of free cash. I didn't want the number arrived at as a combination of excess levy capacity and free cash. And my position is, and this isn't one necessarily a finance director's responsibility, as this is up to the leadership in this board to say whether we think the taxpayers first, whether we think stabilization is more important. What I'm trying to establish is the taxpayers first. And I think that guidance is helpful to him. I don't think it's a hindrance. Because otherwise, he's just swinging at a moving target, because there are lots of ways to skin this cat. You can give $5.7 million back to the taxpayer. It's theirs. It's not leaving money on the table, and if it is, it's the taxpayer's table, and it's the taxpayer's money. So I want to provide some guidance to say, I want to see how we can use free cash at $2.8 million to provide taxpayer relief for the Selectmen's article. Now, what I'd like to see is that breakdown of how he achieves that, how we would reasonably and sustainably achieve that, and what guidance he would give us in order to get there. I think this shouldn't be a moving target. That's why I'd make the motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so your motion is to advise Zach that you would like to see a proposal put forth that's going to return $2.8 million to the tax rate. Is that?
$2.8 million to the tax rate from free cash.
I have no problem with that, because again, once he comes to the meeting, that's what you're requesting, that's fine. When he comes to the meeting again, making his case, and then we'll have to make our decision from that.
Sure. Yeah.
That's fine.
No, that's fine. I mean, certainly we can give him direction, but cautioning, both of you, as I'm sure you're aware, and you read Zach's memo just as I did.
Yeah.
There are two big words that are on the horizon that really need to guide a lot of the decisions, and that's Woodland School, so.
And we've communicated that to town meeting
Yeah.
on at least 5 or 6 different occasions, that we had those funds. I remember a great deal of meetings discussing the affordability of that project before it was taken to town meeting, how we could take it to take it from the stabilization fund after many years of preparing. And the latest document I've read from Zach is that we've got that covered without dipping below a $10 million number in one of our many stabilization accounts. So we've come to a windfall of 5.7 as a result, in some cases, of a single-year event. We've got healthy stabilization. We've funded Woodland. Woodland's not going to impact our budget. We have a way and means to fund that. I just think it's time for the taxpayer.
Yeah, it's always time for the taxpayer. And, one of the best ways to help the taxpayer is to reduce interest payments. But again, we're having a discussion here where we don't even have the report from our finance director. Every other department, we rely upon our department heads to give us direction.
But there's a motion made, it's been seconded, so I'll take a vote. All in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous. Okay.
Okay, good.
Anything else?
Nope.
Motion made to adjourn,
Yes.
seconded. There is no executive session. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Good night. The meeting is over.